The sun hovered above the rooftops of Manhattan, washing Dr. Isabella Warren's penthouse in soft gold morning light. Her dining table was a mosaic of reports, schematics, and digital blueprints from her renewable energy division in Tokyo. Isabella's fingers danced over the trackpad, cross-checking data while a pot of jasmine tea cooled beside her. The hum of the city blended with the gentle chime of her laptop. Another call from London. Alexander's face filled the screen. Crisp suit, rain-soaked skyline behind him. "Morning, Izzy," he said, affection softening his voice. "You're still thinking about skipping my aunt's event?" "It's not my scene. You know how those parties go. Polite smiles, veiled questions, and people pretending to understand energy grid redesign." "They're not all like that," Alexander chuckled, loosening his tie. "Aunt Victoria asked about you specifically. She wants to know you better." She snorted. "She's had 3 years to know me." He didn't argue. He didn't need to. She already knew the truth. His family tolerated her. They didn't embrace her. They didn't celebrate her. They simply accepted her existence in the polite, brittle way old money families sometimes accepted new realities. Alexander leaned closer to the camera. "You belong there just as much as anyone, probably more." Her gaze drifted to the window, to the vast city that had both challenged and elevated her. From a single-parent household in Louisiana, to an engineering doctorate from MIT, to the founder of a billion-dollar green tech empire, her life was built on resilience, not validation. Still, when Alexander asked gently, "Will you go? For me?" she sighed and nodded. "Yes, but don't blame me if I hide in the garden with a book." "That's my girl," he murmured. "And Izzy, don't shrink yourself for them." After the call, Isabella moved through her penthouse, selecting attire with deliberate restraint. No diamonds, no couture, a simple ivory dress, sandals she could walk in, and earrings gifted to her by her mother years before life became complicated. In the kitchen, Maria, her housekeeper, chopped vegetables for lunch. "Sit with me," Isabella said, pulling out a chair. Maria shook her head. "I can't, Mrs. White." "Isabella," she corrected warmly. "And yes, you can." They talked about Maria's daughter and her acceptance into NYU's nursing program. Isabella made a mental note. Send a letter to the dean. Open doors where she could. That's what someone had once done for her. Later, she drove toward the Hamptons alone. No security, no chauffeur. Just her, the open road, and the quiet ache of knowing she was walking into a world that would always question her right to be in it. But she would go anyways. But what happens when the people who believe they own a world decide she doesn't belong in it? The drive to the Hamptons should have been peaceful, but the further Isabella traveled, the more she felt the familiar tension coil in her chest. The quiet anticipation of scrutiny, of being evaluated before being greeted, judged before being known. Her modest rental car hummed steadily along the highway, out of place among the procession of imported sports cars zooming past. She didn't mind. She'd chosen it deliberately. She didn't need her wealth to speak for her, though she knew others would speak loudly on her behalf if they recognized her. But anonymity was a luxury too, and she wasn't ready to surrender it. When she arrived at Victoria Whitmore's estate, the contrast between her car and the others parked in tight, gleaming rows was impossible to miss. Ferraris shimmered like ornaments. A silver Aston Martin caught the afternoon light like a mirror. Her Toyota looked like a practical commuter vehicle that had taken a wrong turn. The valet hesitated visibly when Isabella stepped out. He took the keys with the solemn caution of someone accepting a live grenade. "This is, for the party?" he asked. "Yes," she replied, unbothered. "I'm a guest." His eyes said he didn't believe her, but he directed her toward the entrance anyway. At the security checkpoint, the guard inspected her invitation as though decoding an ancient scroll. He scanned it once, twice, then again. "Seems valid," he muttered, but his tone carried a quiet disbelief. "It is," Isabella said calmly. Inside, the celebration was every bit the spectacle she expected. Champagne and crystal flutes, guests dressed like old-world nobility, conversations floating through the air about market takeovers and museum fundraisers. A string quartet tucked into a corner performed a delicate piece she recognized from an opera house gala. She blended into none of it, though she stood as gracefully as anyone there. Within minutes, a woman in meticulously curated Chanel approached her with a bright, brittle smile. "Oh, good. One of the event staff. Could you tell me where the hors d'oeuvres came from? They're exquisite." Isabella returned the smile. "I wouldn't know. I am a guest." The woman's expression froze, reshaping itself into polite discomfort. "Oh, Minmer, how unexpected." She drifted off quickly, leaving behind a faint perfume trail and a sharper trail of judgment. Isabella found refuge near the pool, a quiet corner where blooming roses softened the edges of the estate's grandeur. She messaged Alexander, letting him know she'd arrived safely. She didn't notice the woman across the terrace watching her with narrowed eyes. The woman studied her the way someone might study a stain on a tablecloth, an inconvenience, a disruption, something that needed removing. By the time she saw her approaching, the tension in the air had already shifted. Because the moment she lifted her gaze, she met the eyes of someone who had already decided she didn't belong. Chelsea Montgomery approached with the sort of confidence people wield like a weapon. Chin high, shoulders squared, eyes hardened by insecurity masquerading as superiority. Her heels struck the tiles with sharp, accusing clicks that made several guests turn to look. Isabella felt the shift before she understood it. A sudden hush, a tightening in the air. The subtle way people angled their bodies, not to help, but to watch. To witness a confrontation they assumed she must have caused. Her stomach fluttered with that old, unwelcome familiarity. The sensation of becoming a spectacle, not a person. "Excuse me," Chelsea said, arms crossing in a motion that seemed more territorial than polite. "Photography isn't allowed at private events." Isabella blinked. "I wasn't photographing anything. I was speaking with my husband." Chelsea's laugh was brittle, glass thin. "Your husband, right. And what does he do?" The way she asked it didn't sound like curiosity. It sounded like a trap, one Isabella had stepped into before in countless boardrooms, backed by decades of being underestimated. "He works in real estate," Isabella said, keeping her voice warm, steady, unthreatening. Chelsea turned dramatically toward her nearby friends, as if confirming her performance for an audience. "Real estate," she repeated loudly. "How original." Isabella inhaled slowly, an inhale anchored in years of learning how to protect her peace without surrendering her dignity. "You asked a question. I answered." "Oh, don't pull that tone with me," Chelsea snapped. "I know everyone here, and you're not one of them." Before Isabella could respond, a man approached, Brett Montgomery, his expression already shaped by irritation and amusement, as though this interruption might be the highlight of his day. "What's happening?" he asked, sizing Isabella up with a look that made her chest tighten. "Judging. Dismissing. Deciding. This woman won't leave."
Chelsea said, slipping her hand through her husband's arm with manufactured distress. She's pretending she belongs here. The lie hung heavily between them. I haven't been asked to leave, Isabella replied, her voice soft but firm. I was invited. Her pulse thudded beneath her skin, steady, controlled, but undeniably louder now. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, weighing everything from her voice to her posture to her dress. She could almost hear their thoughts. Big claim, big story, but does she fit? Does she look like she belongs? I can show you my invitation, she added, trying to keep the peace, even though she should never have needed to. Chelsea's hand shot out, gripping Isabella's wrist so suddenly Isabella gasped. The woman's nails pressed into her skin like tiny accusations. Don't reach for anything, Chelsea hissed. We don't know what you have in that bag. A cold ripple washed over Isabella. Shock first, then hurt, then something heavier, something that felt like memory. The echoes of 1,000 moments spent proving she wasn't a threat. The sting of being feared without reason. The ache of being doubted without cause. Let go of me, Isabella said quietly. Chelsea squeezed harder. Or what? Something cracked inside Isabella. Not her composure, but the last thread of patience she'd hoped would carry her through the afternoon. Because sometimes, the moment someone refuses to see your humanity is the moment everything changes.
For a moment, Isabella stood perfectly still. Not frozen, but choosing stillness the way one chooses to keep from shattering. Chelsea's fingers dug into her skin, and the pain was sharp, undeniable, humiliating. Behind her, the pool sparkled with cruel, sunlit innocence. Around her, faces watched with a hunger she recognized all too well, curiosity mixed with the thrill of witnessing someone they assumed powerless. Her heartbeat fluttered, not out of fear, but out of disappointment, the kind that sits heavy in the ribs, familiar but never easier. Release my arm, Isabella repeated, voice low, as if protecting her own calm. Brett stepped closer, his scotch sloshing, breath thick with entitlement. You're in no position to give orders, he said, amusement curving his mouth. You crashed this event. Happens all the time. People wander in hoping to blend with the wealthy. I'm not a wanderer, Isabella replied softly, or a liar. My name is on the guest list. Someone in the crowd snickered. Another murmured, sure it is. The words pricked her skin like invisible thorns. Then came the question, the one that carried the weight of centuries. You're claiming you know Victoria Whitmore personally? Chelsea scoffed. You? Her eyes traveled slowly, intentionally, from Isabella's shoes to her dress to her face. It wasn't admiration, it wasn't confusion, it was disbelief rooted in something deeper, uglier. I'm married to her cousin, Isabella answered. The crowd didn't gasp, they laughed, the harsh, disbelieving kind that cuts deeper than insult. Brett threw back his head, genuinely delighted. Right, and I'm the Prince of Monaco. Isabella felt a hot sting behind her eyes, the kind that comes not from weakness but from the exhaustion of being continually underestimated. She blinked it away. She would not give them tears. Chelsea's grip tightened, fingers branding her skin. Enough, Chelsea snapped. Stop making a scene. Just leave quietly. I haven't made a scene, Isabella whispered. You've created one around me. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with the strain of holding herself together in a place determined to tear her dignity apart. She tried to step back, but Brett moved to her other side, blocking her path. The two boxed her in with a familiarity that made her stomach twist, not because she recognized them, but because she recognized the behavior, the entitlement, the assumption of authority over her body. Let me speak to Victoria, Isabella said. No, Chelsea barked. And then, with sudden force, she shoved, hard enough that Isabella stumbled backward.
Her heel struck the edge of the pool, and Brett's hand clamped down on her other arm. For a split second, the world held its breath. And in that suspended heartbeat before the fall, Isabella realized the truth. Some people don't just doubt you, they want to see you break. The shove wasn't a dramatic, movie-style push. It was worse. Intentional, casual, the kind of force people use when they're confident there will be no consequences. Chelsea's palm pressed against Isabella's shoulder, sending a jolt through her body. Brett's grip followed, firm and deliberate, a second insult layered on top of the first. The combination tipped her balance. Isabella felt the world tilt. For one strange, suspended moment, she wasn't falling, she was floating. Her mind raced through fragmented thoughts. Not again. Not here. Not like this. Then the water swallowed her. Cold, chlorinated shock hit her lungs before she could gasp. Sound disappeared instantly, replaced by a muffled roar of bubbles rising past her ears. Her dress billowed around her like a ghostly second skin, heavy, suffocating. She pushed upward, instinctively kicking, her chest tightening with the violent contrast of hot adrenaline and icy water. When she broke the surface, breath tearing into her lungs, the first thing she heard was laughter. Laughter. It cut through the air like knives, sharp, gleeful, careless. Dozens of phones were aimed at her like weapons, capturing her humiliation from every angle. She rubbed the water from her eyes, mascara smearing, breathing unevenly, heart pounding in a rhythm that felt too loud, too vulnerable. Someone gasped. Someone else clapped. Chelsea stood at the edge of the pool, mouth covered in performative shock, but eyes bright with satisfaction. Brett smirked, lifting his drink as if toasting her misfortune. There, problem solved. The words struck Isabella harder than the fall. She floated for a second longer, hands trembling, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. The water felt like a spotlight, cold, exposing, merciless. Her mind raced, not with panic, but with the hollow ache that sat deep in her chest, the kind that comes from knowing people enjoy seeing you humiliated. Slowly, with deliberate control, Isabella swam to the side of the pool. Her fingers gripped the edge of the pool. Her arms shook, not from weakness, but from rage she refused to unleash. Water streamed down her shoulders as she pulled herself out, every movement quiet and dignified, even as her soaked dress clung to her skin. Silence rippled through the crowd. Suddenly, laughter felt too loud, too cruel. A young server rushed forward with towels, hands trembling. I'm so sorry, ma'am. This wasn't right. Isabella met his eyes. A flicker of kindness cut through the humiliation. Thank you, she whispered. Her voice cracked only slightly, proof she was human, not unbreakable. Chelsea scoffed loudly. Of course she knows the staff, figures. That one sentence stung more deeply than the fall, more than the cold water, even more than the laughter. Because it wasn't just cruelty, it was the certainty behind it. But what Chelsea didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the woman they tried to break had resources neither wealth nor privilege could predict. Water dripped from Isabella's lashes as she steadied herself on trembling legs. Her soaked dress clung to her body like a second skin, heavy and cold, revealing far more than she ever would have allowed in public. She gathered the towel around her shoulders, palms shaking, not from fear, but from the rawness of the moment. Humiliation had a temperature. It was cold. So impossibly cold. The crowd continued to stare, their curiosity sharper than their sympathy. She wasn't a guest to them. She was entertainment, a spectacle. Something to retell over champagne later, a story to post online for fleeting amusement. Chelsea looked her over with a sneer that sliced through Isabella's composure. Maybe next time you'll remember where you actually belong, she said. Her voice was soft, but dripping with venom. A pulse of heat rose behind Isabella's ribs. Not anger, worse, hurt. That deep, intimate hurt that blooms when someone reduces you to nothing with a single sentence. The kind of hurt that takes you back to childhood moments you thought you'd buried. Teachers who questioned your intelligence, store clerks who watched you like a threat, strangers who clutched their bags tighter when you walked by. Brett lifted his glass casually. Relax, sweetheart. It's just a pool. No need to get dramatic. Just a pool. As if the water were the issue, not the demeaning hands that pushed her, not the assumptions, not the public stripping of her dignity. Her throat tightened. She forced her breathing slow. A young server, Marcus, stepped closer, his voice offering a small lifeline. Ma'am, you didn't deserve that. Not at all. His kindness cracked something tender inside her. In this sea of indifference, one person cared enough to step forward. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the fear that speaking up might cost him his job, and yet he did it anyway. Thank you, she whispered, truly meaning it. Chelsea rolled her eyes dramatically. Of course she knows the help. Always the same story. The words hit Isabella like a slap. Her jaw tightened. She tasted salt, not from the pool, but from the ache rising in her chest. She straightened, lifting her chin, and for the first time since the fall, something fierce flickered in her eyes. You don't know me, Isabella said, soft but steady. You haven't asked my name. You haven't asked anything. You decided who I was the moment you looked at me. Oh, please, stop playing the victim. Chelsea scoffed. Sophie Carter stepped forward from the crowd, her face tight with anger. No, this is wrong, all of it, and I'm recording. That single act, someone choosing truth over comfort, radiated through Isabella's chest like warmth. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. Then, in the distance, faint at first, came the sound that shifted the air. Sirens. Growing louder, closer. And suddenly, the crowd wasn't amused anymore. Because when the police arrive and the truth is on camera, the story stops being entertainment and starts being accountability. The sirens grew louder, slicing through the tension like a warning bell. Conversations stilled. Laughter died instantly. People who'd been eager to film a spectacle suddenly lowered their phones or hid them behind their backs, as though trying to erase their part in the scene. Isabella stood wrapped in the towel Marcus had given her, soaked, shivering, but holding herself with a kind of quiet, exhausted dignity that made some of the bystanders look away. Shame had a way of creeping into the room when a victim refused to collapse. 2 police officers stepped onto the terrace. One older, weary-eyed, with the posture of a man who had seen too many Hampton disputes. The other younger, alert, reading the scene with sharp instinct. They paused when they saw Isabella, the only person wet, the only visibly harmed one, the only one trying to stay composed. The older officer, Patterson, cleared his throat. Someone want to tell me what happened? Brett practically lunged forward, pointing at Isabella like she was an unwelcome stray animal. Officer, thank God. This woman trespassed, crashed the party, became aggressive when we asked her to leave. Isabella felt a slow, cold ache spread across her chest. The lies weren't surprising, but spoken out loud in front of so many people who watched the truth unfold, they still hurt. Not because she believed them, but because she knew some people still would. The younger officer, Kim, approached with a gentleness that immediately softened Isabella's rigid shoulders. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" Isabella lifted her arm. The bruises had already begun darkening, distinct finger-shaped marks pressed into her skin like signatures of cruelty. Officer Kim's eyebrows knit together. She raised a small camera to document the injuries. "When did this happen?" 10 minutes ago," Isabella said quietly. Chelsea scoffed. "She grabbed me first. Self-defense." "No," Sophie cut in, stepping forward, voice trembling but firm. "That isn't true. I recorded everything. She grabbed Isabella twice. Then she and Brett pushed her, deliberately." The weight of Sophie's courage pressed tears unexpectedly to the back of Isabella's eyes. She blinked them.
Officer Kim held the buzzing phone cautiously, as if the call itself carried weight. "Ma'am, it's your husband," she said gently. Isabella nodded once, throat tight. "Please answer it. Put him on speaker." Kim accepted the call. "Hello?" Alexander's voice burst through instantly, sharp, urgent, threaded with fear. "Isabella? Izzy? Are you all right? Why weren't you answering? Security told me something happened." "This is Officer Kim. Your wife is safe, sir. She was pushed into a pool by 2 other guests. We're documenting injuries now." Silence. Then a single word, low and dangerous. "Pushed?" No one on the terrace moved. Chelsea visibly paled. Brett swallowed hard. Officer Patterson leaned closer. "And you are?" "Alexander Whitman. I'm calling regarding my wife." The shift was immediate. Several guests stiffened. A few hands flew to mouths. Someone whispered, trembling, "Oh my God, she was telling the truth." Victoria Whitmore, finally emerging from the main house, froze mid-step. "Alex, is that you?" "Yes, Aunt Victoria. And before we go further, why is my wife soaked and bruised at your event?" The guilt hit Victoria like a physical blow. Her hand flew to her mouth, eyes glossing with horror. I didn't recognize her." "You what?" Alexander's voice cracked like thunder. "You saw my wife 3 months ago." Isabella's chest tightened. She wasn't angry at Victoria, just tired. Deeply, bone-deep tired of being invisible to people who claimed familiarity. Alexander continued colder now. "I'm boarding a jet. I'll be in Southampton in 3 hours. Do not let anyone intimidate her. And someone better explain why she's calling me from a damaged phone." "Her phone was knocked from her hand, sir." "Knocked?" Alexander repeated, voice tightening. "Or destroyed?" Chelsea snapped, desperation fraying her voice. "It was an accident. She dropped it." "Don't you dare lie," Sophie cut in sharply. "I filmed everything." Alexander heard the trembling bravery in Sophie's voice. "Thank you," he said softly to her. Even through the speaker, "Your courage won't be forgotten." Chelsea's breath shuddered. Her confidence dissolved into panic. "We didn't know who she was. She looked... She stopped herself too late. Isabella's stomach twisted. The air dropped in temperature. Alexander's voice dropped, dangerous. "She looked what, Chelsea?" Chelsea trembled, eyes darting around, searching for escape. I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did," Isabella whispered. The hurt sat heavy in her voice, more human than any anger could have been. Officer Patterson straightened his shoulders, the reality settling in. "Sir, we'll file the appropriate charges." Alexander exhaled sharply. "Good, because my wife will be pressing them."
Brett stared at the ground, trembling. Chelsea's mascara streaked down her face as she looked at Isabella, not with remorse, but with terror. Because when a truth finally breaks through privilege, the people who built their power on lies feel it collapse beneath them.
Officer Kim lowered the phone gently. The tension in the air pulled so tight it felt like a held breath waiting to snap. Chelsea's legs wobbled beneath her, mascara streaking down her cheeks in chaotic black lines. Brett looked less like a powerful man and more like a boy caught doing something unforgivable. Face pale, hands shaking slightly, mouth opening and closing without sound. The guests who once laughed now avoided eye contact with Isabella, guilt prickling across their faces. The shift was unmistakable. She wasn't the help. She wasn't out of place. She wasn't a stranger. She was someone they should have treated with basic humanity. And they failed. Officer Patterson approached Isabella carefully now, the authority in his posture softened by visible remorse. "Ma'am, Dr. Warren Whitman, we're going to take your statement," he said gently, "and we'll proceed with the rest pending the evidence." Isabella nodded, but her throat tightened unexpectedly. She wasn't someone who cried easily, not publicly, but humiliation didn't wound the surface. It cut deep. She swallowed the ache, steadying herself. Chelsea snapped suddenly, voice shrill and cracking under the pressure. "We didn't mean to push her. She kept arguing. She wouldn't leave." Officer Kim cut her off sharply. "Miss Montgomery, 2 witnesses have already given video evidence. They show intent." "That's a lie," Brett barked, stepping forward with a shaky bravado. "She was aggressive. She yelled." Sophie stepped between them like a shield, trembling but unwavering. "No, you're not blaming her. Not after what you did." Her voice carried disgust, disappointment, and something else. Courage. Real courage. And for the first time that afternoon, Isabella felt a warmth spread through her chest. Fragile, but present. Someone had seen her. Someone had stepped forward. Marcus, the young server, stood behind Sophie nodding. She didn't raise her voice once. Not once. "I saw everything." Chelsea's composure cracked outright. We didn't know who she was. You thought she was beneath you." Those words, soft yet heavy, hung in the air. Conversation stilled. Several guests closed their eyes, shame washing over their faces. Chelsea's lips quivered. Her voice fell to a whisper. "We made a mistake." Isabella wrapped the towel tighter around herself, shivering not from the cold but from the emotional weight of the moment. "No," she said gently. "A mistake is spilling a drink. A mistake is mispronouncing a name." Her voice trembled, not with rage, but with truth. "This was cruelty. You wanted to hurt me, and you did." Chelsea collapsed into a chair, sobbing weakly, the reality finally landing. Officer Patterson cleared his throat. "Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery, please step forward. You're being placed under arrest for assault." A ripple spread through the crowd. Shock, fear, relief, justice, all twining together. And for the first time that afternoon, Isabella stood taller, not because she felt powerful, but because she refused to feel small. But the story wasn't over yet, because accountability changes people, but justice changes the world. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when Isabella arrived months later, no longer dripping pool water or clenching a towel for dignity. She wore a navy suit, simple pearl earrings, and her natural hair gathered softly at her shoulders. Her stride was steady, calm, composed, centered. The world had changed since the day she was pushed into the pool, and in quiet, undeniable ways, she had changed too. Inside the courtroom, the Montgomerys sat at the defense table, smaller than she remembered, both physically and emotionally. Chelsea's once polished confidence had eroded into a kind of hollow fragility. Brett looked older, edges worn down by consequences he never believed could touch him. Isabella inhaled deeply. She felt no satisfaction in their downfall, only the heavy weight of truth. Some lessons broke people before they rebuilt them. Witnesses testified one by one. Marcus, voice shaking but sincere. Sophie,
steady, and brave. Even Victoria took the stand, remorse filling every syllable of her apology. But when Isabella rose to speak, the room stilled. She looked at the jurors, faces open, uncertain, listening, and then at Chelsea and Brett, who wouldn't quite meet her eyes. "I didn't come here for revenge," she said softly, her voice carrying warmth and ache in equal measure. "I came here because what happened to me happens to people every day. People without cameras recording, without witnesses stepping forward, without the resources to be believed." She paused, breath catching faintly. "I came here because silence protects the powerful, and courage, even a single voice, protects the truth." When the guilty verdicts were read, the courtroom didn't erupt. It didn't cheer or gasp. It simply breathed. A long collective exhale of justice finally settling in the air. Months later, Isabella stood on a stage at the Harlem Community Center. The room was full. Students, dreamers, small business owners, the next generation of brilliance that too often went unseen. She awarded grants, shared resources, told her story not as a victim, but as a witness, and someone who chose to rise. After the ceremony, Alexander found her by the window. The city lights shimmered below like small burning hopes. He wrapped an arm around her waist, resting his forehead gently against her temple. "You good?" he murmured. She leaned into him, just enough to feel him there, steady and warm. "I'm healing," she said. "And that's enough." Later that night, a news alert flashed across her phone. Chelsea Montgomery released on parole. Isabella stared at the screen for a long moment. Instead of anger, a quiet acceptance settled over her. They've served their time. Now they have to live their life differently. And so do I. She set the phone down. The world wasn't perfect, but she had helped bend it, even slightly, towards justice. And she wasn't done. Because the real question isn't what happened to Isabella. It's what we choose to do the next time we witness injustice. Will we stand silent or stand up?